Did anyone ever tell you that there are 12 historical facts that verify Jesus literally rose from the dead? And did you know that these 12 historical facts are accepted as true by over 90% of the most influential New Testament historical scholars in the world today? Well, it's true. So my question to you is, would you be interested in hearing what these 12 historical facts are? My guest today is Dr. Gary Habermas, one of the world's most respected and well-known scholars on the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Professor Habermas holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree from Michigan State University in History and Philosophy of Religion, and he is the chairman of the Department of Philosophy at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. He's also the author, co-author, or editor of over 40 books. So we invite you to join us for this special edition of the John Ankerberg Show to hear these 12 historical facts that show Jesus literally rose from the dead. Welcome to our program. I'm John Ankerberg, and my honored guest is Dr. Gary Habermas. And the fact is, we're talking to those of you that have doubts about your religion. Maybe you're thinking of leaving religion all the way around, or you're saying, "Listen, I just can't get into my head to believe in God. I just don't know what to do." And some of you have already left, and you say, "Hey, I'm done because I tried that, didn't work for me, so it's not for me at all." Would it make a difference to you if we presented to you 12 historical facts about Jesus' resurrection that are accepted by almost 95% of the greatest scholars around the world, okay? Gary Habermas is doing the research on this. He's already up to about 4,500 pages. When he gets done with the book in about a year, we'll be lucky to lift the book, but the fact is, you're going to find out what the top scholars are saying is true about Jesus. Not just we're not quoting Bible verses here, we're talking about Greek sources, Roman sources, all kinds of sources that have information, data about the facts that we're talking about. Independent sources that collaborate what we're talking about. Okay, and in this session, what we're doing is I'm asking Gary to do something a little different than what we've been doing before, and that is, if he was talking to all skeptics and he only had a short period of time, okay, and he had to take the 12 historical facts and he could only give 6 of them, half of them, plus maybe one, okay? We'll tell you what that one is in a minute, okay? If he did that, how would he present this to scholars? And I've seen him do this at Oxford and Cambridge, and you can watch it on the internet. The fact is, I'm asking him to kind of go up a step, and I hope that you'll stick with us. We'll kind of define terms as we go along. But Gary, if you were introducing this to people that you knew were skeptics starting out, that really there's not good information about Jesus, and when you compare the New Testament with ancient history and so on, this stuff is kind of fairy tales, and that stuff's really good stuff, solid stuff, okay? How would you start your 6+1?
Sometimes I work from the cross down to about 100. Sometimes I start at 100 and go back. But the worst the answer gets in terms of time and data would be to say, well, we've got these 4 books we call the Gospels, the first 3 called the Synoptic Gospels, and even using critics' dates, Mark would be placed at 65 to 75 AD, or about 70. Matthew is usually placed about 80. Luke about 85. And John, everybody puts the bookends, Mark and John at about 95. Evangelicals often move a little bit earlier, but skeptics are going to hang in there. And here's the key. It doesn't make any difference which date you use. Because if John is the oldest at 95-ish, or 100 if you like, Jesus dies in 30, that's a nice round 70 years. And people they say categorically, oh, come on, 70 years. How can you believe something, especially religious stuff, 70 years later? I say, time out. Have you looked at secular history? Have you looked at other religious data? For example, people think I'm using a bad example if I say, well, Alexander the Great. I'm not talking about an inscription or a rock or something. I'm talking about a biography that would correspond to the Gospels, only for Alexander. And our earliest sources, now there were earlier ones for Alexander. We may find them someday, but right now they don't exist. The earliest ones that are extant, the first one starts about 280 years after Alexander died. 280. So John's horrible at 70, but Alexander's fine at 280.
Yeah, and if you ask any secular historian, what do you think about Alexander the Great? That he didn't exist because his biography was, starting off at 280 after he lived? There's not one historical scholar in the world that say Alexander the Great didn't live.
Right, but I've even prejudiced that answer because the earliest one is 280, but the best sources, Plutarch and Arrian, are plus 4¼ to 450. Almost a half a millennium after Alexander died. Okay, so the first comeback was, you're too late. Not so, on the ancient time frame here. But they go, well, okay, but that's history. You're doing propaganda, meaning any little old religious thing that comes to your mind, you tell the story, and really? Well, I'm glad all our sources are straight history in Alexander, because Plutarch, one of the two main ones, starts out like this. It was commonly believed that Alexander was the son of a god and that his mother was a virgin. Now someone might go, oh, virgin. Just a little note here. Suetonius says the same thing about Caesar Augustus. Go, well, did Christians copy off them? I know that's off the subject, but both those writers are writing about 120 AD, almost 100 years after the Jesus. I wonder where they may have gotten the idea for that. But be it as it may, almost a half a millennium later, how about theological sources or religious sources?
Yeah.
I have a book at home by a PhD Buddhist, and he starts his book like this. When you open it up, he says, you Christians, you have the words of your Lord. We don't have the words of our Lord. You got the words of those who heard, and those who heard those who heard. We don't have anything like that. And then he goes on and says, most of my sources in this book, he's editing some Buddhist documents, my sources are 600 to 800 years after Buddha lived. Twice the difference of Alexander to Alexander. And those are religious.
Right.
And now we know that, by the way, just an aside, the earliest sources for Buddha, Confucius, and Lao Tzu of Taoism, those three were apparently naturalists. They didn't even believe in God's existence, most likely. They're not theistic religions. So it's a different world out there, but I'm just saying that kind of prejudice that says, plus 70? Are you kidding me? I go, actually, plus 70 is excellent in the actual world.
How about Muhammad?
Hey, Bart Ehrman, as I've said before, Bart Ehrman, when he's saying, what do we know about Jesus? He goes 100 years from the crucifixion.
Yeah.
That's a nice round 30 to 130. John makes it in by a comfortable 35 years. You got that other source I mentioned, the Gospel to the Hebrews, where Jesus shows himself to James. That makes it in there. So does some other non-Christian, non-canonical books. So the Gospels are fine. But we can do way better than that. We can get a lot earlier than that, as we've already pointed out.
Yeah, but now let's get down to the fact of, all right, so in terms of secular history versus the gospel, it's been very interesting that there's been an evolution of thought among the secular scholars in the world that they now have taken the Roman biographies, basically, and they say, let's apply the same criteria to the New Testament. So the historical tools that they've been using has been applied to the New Testament, and they've come up with a whole new scenario about who Jesus is, and we're basing our facts on some of those scenarios. First of all, they say there are some books in the New Testament that were written that are reliable. They're not inspired, they're not the inerrant Word of God, but they're reliable historically, just like these Roman bios, okay? They don't buy everything the Roman bios say either, okay? But what are the books that they call reliable historical information?
Well, the group I just talked about, the Gospels are making a comeback, especially Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and even John is kind of sneaking back in. It's Richard Bauckham who defends the view that John was written by an eyewitness.
That's right.
So the Gospels are coming back, but the main body that critics use are the so-called 7 authentic epistles of Paul. And those 7, the interesting thing is, all the critics say 7, and all of them say the same 7. There's unanimity here, and they are Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Philippians, 1 Thessalonians, and Philemon. Those 7, you can use them. As you said, not as, oh, this is inspired, I'm going to quote a verse and I'm done. No, but as a good text from a guy who's in the know, who was a good scholar, who knows the other ones, there in the beginning, believed he met the risen Jesus. That's the guy who's writing this. And so Paul is the most incredible source. The critics would prefer Paul to the Gospels, but the Gospels are being brought back into the picture. And as a 1-2 punch, we're starting to get a body of data that frankly is unparalleled in ancient religions or ancient history.
Okay, and you start with the first one. You say Jesus died by crucifixion is your first event you want to talk about, including your 6+1.
Of the 6, I would say Jesus was crucified and died. The disciples had experiences that they believed were appearances of the risen Jesus. We're taking them right out of the list. Thirdly, this was proclaimed very early. We said James D.G. Dunn says months, which could have been the same year. Others say the same year. And it's a consensus view today that this all was on the ground and running by the time Paul came to Jerusalem, interviewed Peter and James, and that's +3. That's only 3 years. Bart Ehrman never gives a certain number that I'm aware of, but he lists a number of early sources, and he has at least 6, maybe 8, from his dating 1 to 2 years after the cross. So early is very, very important. So I'm going to get crucified, real experiences, proclaimed early. They turned the world upside down. And we mentioned this already, but just to repeat, I don't argue they all have to have died for their faith. I say the ones whose records we have about them going out there and turning the world upside down, especially the big 4, Paul, James, the brother of Jesus, because James, the son of Zebedee, is already dead. He's killed. And Peter and John, the 4 of them, they're turning the world upside down by themselves in Jerusalem and beyond the world. And how do you know they were willing to die? Because they constantly put themselves in situations where, I don't want to say if they died, c'est la vie. I don't want to just say it's nothing. But they were more interested in proclaiming the data than they were as to what happened to them. All right, so that's 4. Crucifixion, experiences, early, turned the world upside down. And then 2 skeptics we've talked about. An insider skeptic, James, a family member. An outsider skeptic, Paul, PhD Old Testament, thought he was doing God a favor by imprisoning men and women, and he says himself, I don't even deserve to be called an apostle. By the way, right after he says that, it's right after the early creed in 1 Corinthians 15. In verse 11, he says, whether it is I or they, so we preach, and so you believe. Paul's saying, hey, you don't believe me? Ask Peter. Oh, you don't like Peter? Ask James. Ask John. We're all there in that meeting. They gave me the right hand of fellowship. We're all doing the same thing together. We're all preaching the same message. And that's very, very important, that unanimity, that early transforming the world unanimity. There's just nothing like this in the ancient world.
Right, and I think we just went right past the layperson by saying it so quickly, and I want to slow it down, and we're going to take one guy, and that's Paul. He's the darling of the skeptics. I want us to go back to 1 Corinthians 15, because this is a statement that is a traditional statement. The Jews would say this is tradition, it's being passed down by a scholar, okay? Because the words are there. I received it and I'm delivering it to you, okay? And he says this is of first importance. So he's saying this is the cat's meow. This is a thing you need to listen to. And then it's interesting when this comes out and what the scholars say about the time period when this comes out. Take it from there and then go through the list a little slower here.
Yeah, Paul, I want to emphasize this so much. I don't want to overdo this, and we don't have to choose between them. But maybe the most important thing Paul contributes, his eyewitness testimony is incredible. But to me, with Bart Ehrman and others, Paul doing that interviewing in Galatians 1 and 2 is, who does this kind of stuff? Who does hysteresis? Who goes and checks things out? You're going to get on the ship and you're going to go all the way back to Jerusalem just to ask these guys what they saw? If this is religion and we just believe anything, why don't you just say, oh, I heard they believe it. No. He's going to go check it out. That's just incredible.
Yeah, let's go back here for a moment, because Paul gets saved on the road to Damascus 2 years after the resurrection.
Right.
And he goes into the far country there, and he stays by himself. And then, after 3 years, so 2 after the resurrection, plus 3 where he's away, and then he decides to go to Jerusalem to have this hystereso, this little conversation where he checks out with 2 of the big guys, okay? Peter, who's supposed to be the chief of all the apostles, and the Lord's own brother, okay? And he says, 15 days with these guys, all right? And this is where Bart Ehrman says, well, I'd sure like to ask those guys some questions for 15 days, okay? And so pick it up right there.
Yeah, and so Paul reports this, comes back 14 years later, which is still before 50 AD. That's the second meeting where John is there. You know, you think about things like intelligent design and all this, look at everything coming in. What's the likelihood that Paul would have got the right guys at the right time, right after the event was over? Oh, well, you left John out. No, I'm picking him up in the next visit. I mean, it's all there. And what are you doing? I'm asking questions. Well, how do we know? Well, this is a book that's all about the gospel, Galatians. And by the way, these early creedal things, about 80% of these creeds are repetition of the deity, death, and resurrection of Jesus. They all stay on this topic because it's the center of faith, which is one of our 12 facts.
And the creeds that we're talking about are not the ones at 300 or 400. We're talking about the fact that these are little statements that the scholars see. So if you're writing a term paper as a kid, and the fact is all of a sudden you say, hey, I'm going to use this quote from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and you put it in there and you hand it in to your teacher's reading, and he knows your language, and all of a sudden he sees the Encyclopedia Britannica language, and he says, whoa, Tano, this is not the same guy that I knew before. He's got a quote from someplace else. Well, the scholars have looked at the New Testament, and they're going down the script, and all of a sudden they see Paul using words that he never uses anyplace else.
True.
Or he's using Jesus Aramaic, and he sticks that in there, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. And the scholars say, let's mark that, because Paul, those aren't his words, he got them from someplace else. And this is what we're talking about.
Maranatha, even so come, Lord Jesus, which by the way means Jesus was still alive when Paul's writing that 25 years later. And that's Aramaic. Another one, of course, is when Jesus referred to God as his Father, when he, Paul uses the private, family language for what his son would say to his dad. And so Paul's careful to preserve the data. And that's why critics like him. It doesn't mean they think he's infallible or something else, but they like him because they think he's a great scholar. And when Richard Bauckham writes his book, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, what you're doing there is not inspiration, he's doing reliability. He's saying these sources were woven together in such a way that they make great sense. And Richard is doing mostly the Gospels there, but it's in that book, again, where he says the consensus New Testament view is that this stuff was around before Paul was converted. Paul gathers it when he comes. He'd already met the risen Jesus. So now instead of being angry, he realizes this material's true, and he goes out and proclaims it. And by the way, back to Britannica, when the teacher says, Bobby, this isn't your language. Now look, I know, you're not old enough to be doing this, but really, just so you know, if you're older, you're going to put a little footnote here, and you're going to say Encyclopedia Britannica. Well, Paul put the footnote there, because twice he says, I delivered unto you that which I also received. Those are technical words for passing on tradition, and Paul is saying, the source is not mine. I got it from somebody else. Footnote.
Yeah, and I want the non-Christian that is listening to this, the skeptic is saying, okay, what's so important about the list of people that he gives? He's giving it early, number one. This has been in existence before Paul is actually writing this. And the fact is, what is the information that he gives? Who are the people that he names? And why is it significant?
Yeah, if you go back to the list I was doing, I was saying, John is fine at 70. He's 30 years within Bart Ehrman's 100-year end. But he go, well, hey, if you don't like John, how about Mark? Mark is 25 years earlier. You like Mark? Oh, hey, well, if you like Mark, you're really going to like the epistles. Now, at first if First Thessalonians usually said to be the earliest New Testament book, and that book at about 50 AD, and some people put it at 48, 49. At 50 AD, when First Thessalonians is written, Jesus is not becoming the Son of God. He's Lord, he's Messiah, he's the Son of God. Someone says, well, if that was true in 50, where does Paul get this? And then you go back and find out that in the earliest sources, they're worshiping. Monotheistic, law-abiding Jews are worshiping Jesus. So you get that again, deity, death, resurrection. It's the gospel. Paul says, get it right. Don't make it bigger. Don't make it smaller. Preach it like it is. And he did the research, and when he writes the first book, those sources are in it, and these high view of Jesus is already there. So it's like, hey, do you like 70? Maybe you like Mark at only plus 30. But what do you think about 1 Thessalonians at plus 20? Oh, and we have creedal sources that go back the same year to plus 5. And now you go, are you aware of any religion or ancient historian that doesn't just have this lineage, but that it comes in from multiple sources? And now, if I dare say it, maybe you find out why unbelievers sometimes are not happy with us because they don't have this. They're tired of having it crammed down their throats. But if you're a searcher, if you're a seeker, and you're looking for data,
and if the information in 1 Corinthians 15, this little passage, which is a creedal statement, which is a summary statement of what's being passed on, okay, that Paul wants them to know about, if this is within 2 years of the fact of when Jesus was crucified, describe the list of people that he talks about.
Yeah, and you said 2 years, if Jimmy Dunn is right, and he's not the only one, it's the same year. So in that list, you've got 3 individuals: Peter, the chief apostle; James, the family member who's now pastor of the Church of Jerusalem. Paul adds his own name later, but so you've got Peter, James, Paul. You've got 3 groups. The 12, a group called all the apostles, which everybody says is larger than the 12, maybe the women, maybe the brothers of Jesus. They're there in Acts 1 when they're in the upper room. And you've got the over 500 at once, and if those are men alone, you could be 1,000, you could be 1,200. You have the 3 groups. So coming out of the gate, you have everything you could want. You've got the proclamation, it's footnoted. You've got the key people. The 3 individual names are the big names. You have 3 groups, and Paul ties a bow around it by saying, I'm last, but then he adds verse 11, whether it's I or they, we're all preaching that unanimity. That's an important point. Otherwise, you could say, well, yeah, Paul was going off on his own thing. No, he wasn't. They went back to Jerusalem, and they added nothing to me. And just a few verses later, they lay hands on Paul and Barnabas and say, blessed, you're giving the gospel to the Gentiles.
Yeah, Bart Ehrman cites this passage 3 different times in this book and says, yeah, it's true. He knew all about it. Next week, we're going to continue this discussion, and we're going to go back to another one of the eyewitnesses that's in this passage that a lot of the scholars say is just either 2 years after, or it goes right back to almost Jesus himself, all right? Within that 2-year period of time, we're going to talk about James, all right? And so I hope that you are understanding how important this is, and I want you to learn to be able to share this with your neighbors, with your friends, those that are skeptical of the faith. We're using solid information that's backed up by the scholars around the world, and I want you to know this, okay? Stay tuned. I got a personal word for you in just a moment.
Stay tuned for a special word from John.
Thank you for joining me to hear our program today. If you would like to learn the 12 historical facts that show Jesus literally rose from the dead, we are making available the 5 television programs in this series on DVD for a gift of $49. You will hear the medical and historical evidence that has led 99% of all historical scholars to believe that there is no more certain fact in history than that Jesus died on the cross. Then, you will hear why scholars have come to believe that after Jesus was crucified and buried, he appeared to his 12 apostles, then to 500 people at one time, then to a group of 100 of his followers, then to a group of women, and also to individuals like Peter, his unbelieving brother James, and to Paul, who was killing Christians, The latter two men, who were both converted when they saw the risen Jesus. Why is it that over 90% of the most influential historical New Testament scholars in the world at some of our most prestigious universities accept these historical facts as true? What is the evidence that underlies these 12 historical facts? The 5 television programs in this series will lay out the historical evidence for you. And you may order our 5 television programs in this series now by calling us at 1-800-805-3030. Then, we are making available a second series with Dr. Habermas called Evidence for the Historical Jesus. The 6 programs in this second series answer additional questions such as: how can we know what message was preached about Jesus before any of the New Testament books were written? Are there any non-Christian sources that tell us Jesus actually lived, died on a cross, was buried, and afterwards was seen by his disciples? What historical material inside and outside of the New Testament shows Jesus himself claimed that he was God? Our second series is also available for a gift of $49. And finally, if you would like to have both television series, all 11 TV programs, they are available together for a gift of only $98. And you may order these 2 series now by calling us at 1-800-805-3030. Write it down. That's 1-800-805-3030. And you may call that same number any day this week, 24 hours a day. Further, you may also order this series and give your gift at our website at jashow.org, where we have a secure place for you to give your gift. Our website again is jashow.org. And then, those of you who live in Canada may call us at 1-866-746-5803. And our Canadian website is jashow.ca.